This week on Hands-On Photography, we're going at it a little bit differently. We're going to sit down with the laptop, with the mouse, with the Wacom Tablet, and a beverage, and we're going to take a look at some photos. Stay tuned.
This is TWiT.
This episode of Hands-On Photography is brought to you by FreshBooks. Try it free for 30 days at freshbooks.com/hop. Hey folks, I am Pruitt, and this is Hands-On Photography here on TWiT.tv. Thank y'all for popping in on this fine Thursday afternoon. Hope y'all are doing well. I'm unbelievable as always, and I'm really excited to get into this show because we're going to get into it a little bit differently again. I thought about this because next week is a holiday week here in the US, and next week I will not be recording Hands-On Photography or Focus on Photography. So I said, well, since I'm going to take that week off, I'm just going to chill out a little bit on air. Y'all don't mind that, right? Just going to chill out, open up Lightroom, take a look at some photos, go through a workflow just like I normally would. So I got my mouse, my Wacom tablet, I got my whiskey, my Gatorade, sorry. It's still working hours, so I can't have my whiskey just yet. But I do typically like to have a beverage with me when I'm sitting down going through my images. And a lot of times I'll even throw on some headphones because I just sort of like to zone out and just really focus in what's on my screen and just immerse myself in it and just black out all of the different distractions and stuff that's going on around me. And it allows me to really just pull out the story and the life of the shots that I grabbed right here. Okay, so pre-show, before we got started, I pulled up a couple images and I asked the chat room because they were watching pre-show. That's an advantage of jumping into the live stream. I asked them to vote on a shot to take a look at. I didn't tell them why. I just asked which one makes you more interested to look into. And they came up with shot number 4, which is shown right now on my laptop. I'll go ahead and show you the other ones that was in the running too. This was number 1. This was number 3 that was offered. And this is shot number 4. So we're going to roll with this one. I shot this one a couple weeks ago while I was hanging out at Adobe Max, just walking around downtown Los Angeles because I needed to give myself a photo walk as a good way to just decompress, if you will. I had to get out there with my camera and just walk around and just click and just let go. And as I'm walking the streets, I saw this image here of this lady attempting to cross yet another busy street downtown, and it just piqued my interest. Of course, it looks okay, but I think I can make it look a little bit better and a little bit more compelling. We've talked about composition ideas as far as cropping and framing. We're going to look at that, but we can also take a look at just, color and mood. So I'm just going to walk y'all through and give you a little bit of my whole Bob Ross feel, if you will. So I'm just pay me no mind. You might catch me talking to myself a little bit, but let's go ahead and dive into this here image and get started. All right, so Lightroom, what do we have here? Good old 24 megapixel image, shot it in RAW so I can pull all of this data out. And let's see, it's a little underexposed. Let's pull this up just a little bit. Okay. All right, so that's the thing about shooting at night too. I tend to try to underexpose it shooting at night. Because I like to have that flexibility to bring some of the light back without generating a bunch of image noise and grain. So as you can see right here, there's still a little bit of grain and noise in this image because you're shooting at a much higher ISO. So I just try to shoot a little bit underexposed to minimize that as best as possible. Contrast. If I take this contrast up, this is going to allow these images to break up a little bit and make them look a little bit more defined. When you have people looking at the contrast setting in any of your photo editors, think of it as a way of making your colors stand out. It's not necessarily saturation, but it's allowing you to see the differentiation between red here and this dark brownish black area, and so on and so forth. It really defines everything for you. My highlights look okay. I think I'm going to push the highlights up because I like these headlights. So I'm going to push it up just a little bit here. And all I'm doing inside of Lightroom, I'm just following the normal flow of the interface here, just going straight down the line. Sometimes I can skip around because I've been in this app so many years. I can skip around and know exactly what I'm going to, but for the purpose of you all, I'm going to try to just go straight down the line and hit on what needs to be hit on to make this image look a little bit better. Take these shadows up just a touch, not too much. I'm not going to touch the white levels because I think the white levels are fine where they are. Decrease the black, which is given a little more contrast by crushing the blacks. Yeah, I dig that. Okay, so far so good. We can give you a little bit of a before and after. This is the before on the left, and this is what it currently looks like. And that's just with some quick touch-ups, and it's already looking better and has a little more life. All right, so now we can get into some of the fine details of it beyond the tone. And yep, Loquacious, you're right. You put that extra black levels in there, it really does allow the image to sort of pop a little more, and the colors will pop a little bit more too. And that's without increasing saturation or vibrance. So let's take this clarity. What's popular on Instagram is taking this clarity setting and cranking it up. When you look at Instagram, you'll see a lot of pictures that look like this because Instagram tends to compress the images once they're uploaded, so they lose a whole lot of detail. So a lot of photographers will just crank this setting up because they know it's going to be compressed, and it ends up looking a little more along that line versus like that. But I don't want to put that much because that's not the look I'm going for. Dehaze. I sort of fight with dehaze because there are some instances I actually want haze in my image, which I probably will add haze to this image because sometimes haze will give you a certain mood. Now adding it right here doesn't look very good. So I'm just going to put it back and take it off just a touch, but not much. Saturation really does look fine, but what happens if I push it up just a little bit? Okay, all right. Now I could pretty much stop right there because I love the tonality of it. So now I would sort of just go into a experimental mode, if you will. So let's take a look at the white balance again, scrolling back up to the top. And I want to cool it off because it was a little bit cool that night in LA to me. And when I shoot, I tend to process based on the emotion that I felt when I clicked the shutter. And I remember it feeling a little bit cooler that night. So why not just cool off the image like that? And this gives a little bit better white balance too. Notice the sweater that this lady is wearing looks a little more truer to white. All right, so now we'll go ahead and start getting a little bit creative. We've already gone through these couple sliders here. This tone curve is here. I personally don't like to use curves inside of Lightroom. I think you get a better effect inside of Photoshop using curves. And a lot of times when you make all of these adjustments right here and then go into curves and make adjustments, you're pretty much doing the same thing that's already up here in the UI. So don't overdo it. So I typically just close that and leave that alone. I only come in there if I really need to change something like the actual a particular channel, color channel in it. So we'll just go ahead and close that up for now. This is where the fun begins. Let's get creative. So we have these HSL values: hue, saturation, luminance. Saturation, we talked about it previously, where we can basically desaturate or enhance the saturation of a particular color. Like right now, orange and blue is what's standing out to me. And if I want to just sort of enhance that, I could just go ahead and push that orange up some, just a little bit. And y'all know how I feel about orange, clearly. So let's push it up just a little bit, but not too much. And what I also like about this section is you can control some of your noise reduction in here up under the luminance tab. I can't speak today. And so I would look at the orange here and increase it, and it'll start to smooth out some of the noise right along here in the image, and over here, starting to smooth it out a little bit. So I'll do the same thing with the yellow. Here we go. So when I zoom in, it's still there. It still needs some noise reduction, but it's not as bad as it was previously. So that's a little tip there, is to play with that luminance tab. Split toning. This is something that could be trendy. I don't do a lot of split toning. Another popular thing on Instagram is to give your image a lot of people like to call it the quote unquote cinematic look in your images. And I hate that because cinematic is more movies, telling a story or what have you. Just because you change the color tone to the typical orange and teals that you see in a lot of movies nowadays, that doesn't mean that image is telling a story, but that's just how people describe it. I'm not going to call it cinematic look. I'm just going to say the popular orange and teal tones. So let's see. I'll show it to you. I don't want to do it on this image, but I'll show it to you just for the sake of the gram. Is that what the youngsters say?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, the gram. Okay, cool. So I'm going to crank this up here, put that hue more to an orange tone, and then I'll go to the shadows, and I'll slide this over to the teal side, like that, and then push that up. So I bet if you scroll through your Instagram right now, you're going to see a bunch of images that have that tonality right there. That works for people. That doesn't work for people. I don't use it very often, don't care to. It's just not my style. So I'm going to turn that off. You saw it. We're going to move on. There. Sharpening inside of Lightroom. Not my favorite. It's gotten better. There's a tool right here, this masking tool. I can crank it up by holding down the Alt button and sliding it. And what this is going to do is tell me where Lightroom can do its actual sharpening. All of those white areas, that's where the sharpening is going to happen. Okay? If I did it like this, it's going to try to sharpen the whole image. In particular, I don't need this noise to be sharpened, so why would I try to sharpen it? So hold down your Alt key, or I think it's Option on a Mac, and then you just drag that masking. All right, so now, when I go to move my sharpening slider, I'm not going to add sharpness to this smoothed out noisy area. So we'll push it up like that. And just like with the masking, I can hold down Alt or Option and see the sharpening working right in front of my eyes a lot clearer, like that. And that's pretty good. It's not great. It could be better. We're going to pop that into Photoshop here in a minute to finish that up as far as the sharpening goes, because I still got a couple ideas about this shot. All right, so noise reduction. Again, we saw that this is pretty grainy, and that's not my fault. That's just the nature of shooting at night, low light, with a high ISO. It's gonna happen. That's just camera tech. I don't care what camera you have, that's gonna happen. So I'm gonna go ahead and just try to save it and get rid of a little bit of the noise as best I can. Exactly, Loquacious. Nature of night shooting. Just push it up a little bit. Now, if I crank this noise up, it's gonna really just smooth everything out, and it looks pretty fake. So I try to just put it at about halfway or so. And if it still has a little too much of that smoothing effect, you go to the detail slider right below it and give yourself a little more detail back. So now let's zoom in. We've decreased the noise. That's a lot better. But we still have detail. We can still see detail in her sweater and in the cart and so forth. Chromatic aberration, I don't really have a lot of that on this image. I can turn it on if I want. It's not going to hurt anything. Typically what that means is you'll see a little bit of color fringing. Like right here where the cursor is, you would see like little purple pixels or little magenta pixels, and that's chromatic aberration. But I don't really have that in this image, so it's not an issue. And because I was shooting with a particular lens, I can enable a lens profile. And I was shooting with the Canon 70-200 f2.8. And when I turned that on, you notice that Lightroom noticed, it recognized that I shot with that particular lens, and it changed the aspect of the image just slightly. So let me turn it off, and you'll notice that the image will sort of bow just a little bit and have a little bit of a curvature to it, like that. But this is the actual correct aspect of it. Notice it flattened it out because it knew I was shooting with a particular lens. And you're going to find a bunch of different lenses in here. Adobe has worked with pretty much all of those manufacturers, from Canon and Nikon and so on and so forth. Even if you use a smartphone, you can search for a Google Pixel lens profile, because all of these lenses have curvatures. So let's go ahead and put this back. There we go. Much better. Okay, so now I'm feeling pretty good about this, but I still think this image could use just a little bit more, a little more effects, and maybe even change up the framing on it. But I think I'll do all of that inside of Photoshop. But before we hop into Photoshop, I want to take this opportunity to thank this week's sponsor of this week's episode of Hands On Photography. This episode of Hands On Photography is brought to you by FreshBooks. FreshBooks takes the stress out of accounting for you and your business with easy-to-use billing, expense organization, and time tracking. Always on the go? FreshBooks has you covered. Download their easy-to-use app today and always have your business with you. Visit freshbooks.com/hop and enter Hands On Photography in the How Did You Hear About Us section to receive 30 days free. That's freshbooks.com/hop. All right, so now, again, I want to add a little bit of something extra to this shot. So I'm going to go ahead and just pop on over to Photoshop. All I got to do is just right click, say Edit in Photoshop. And hopefully Photoshop opens. Yeah, it looks like it's trying. Any day now. Oh, there it is. Looks like it was on the wrong monitor somehow. Not sure how that happened. Okay, so I need to zoom out just a little bit like that. That's better. Now, ideally in Photoshop, depending on what I'm doing, the first thing I like to do is enlarge it, because when I enlarge it, that gives me a little bit of freedom to crop it later. And I'm sure that's probably not going to make a lot of sense, so allow me to explain. I'm going to set this up to about 150%, and it's going to get larger. But notice right here, it says resample and preserve details. Ideally, when you go to blow up an image, you are stretching it out, so you lose a lot of the quality of those pixels by stretching them out. Photoshop says, you know what, we can fix that. We can help preserve that. So you can blow up your image, but you're going to keep all of those pixels nice and tight and preserve a lot of that detail for you. So just select Preserve Detail 2.0 on your screen and make sure that Reduce Noise is set to 100%. I typically go with about 150% to make it bigger, so I can be safe with any type of cropping. Now click OK, and it's going to think, do all of its wonderful math, and then it should just sort of blow up on the screen. Boom, it does. And of course, that's zoomed in too tight for me, but even still, I'm zoomed in right now. This detail looks good. Remember all that image noise that we had when we first started? We smoothed that out. And even though we enlarge it again, we still have all of that image noise smoothed out. So whatever math and magical stuff that Photoshop is doing in that enlargement process is working, and I'm all for it. All right, so we'll keep it right about there. Now, I also talked about sharpening, and I like sharpening my images in Photoshop because the tools are a little bit better. I have what we call actions inside of Photoshop that's already built in that allows me to go through my sharpening procedure. And up here, you can see step by step what I normally would do manually, duplicating a layer, changing the layer name, making a group, changing it to a smart object. So it's a lot of different steps, but I can set this action up to do all of that. And I just click this button and it does it that quickly for me. And you'll notice once it's done, the difference in clarity. You can do it. There it goes. Now you see all the extra layers popping up. Change it to smart object. I keep right clicking. I don't need to right click. You can do it, Photoshop. There we go. Add in a blur, high pass filter, boom, done. All right. Didn't need this brush filter. That was an accident. Okay, so it's done all of the sharpening. Let me pull this up a little bit where we can see a little bit better. Yes, I will, on another episode, we will talk about sharpness and adding these action steps. That is on my roadmap to share with you all. But that will be another episode of Hands-On Photography. So let's take a look at it. This is what it looks like now after I've sharpened it up. And this is what it looked like before. Look right here. You can tell it's just a little bit softer on the edges. But when I turn that back on, we get a little more detail. Actually, it's a little too much detail, because if I zoom in, it's a little too much detail right there. So I'm going to back off on that sharpness just a touch. And the only reason I can do that is because this is a smart object. So I'm going to double click on this high pass filter, and I'm going to dial it back from 5.4 to, we'll say 4.5. There. Yeah, now that looks a little bit better. So now I'm done with all of that, and I have all of my sharpness layers all squared away in a group. I don't need this anymore. I'm not going to delete it. I'm just going to merge everything to make it its own layer, and I still have non-destructive photo editing going. So I still have my before and my after right here. But now we're going to have a little bit of fun with this. I'm looking at these headlights. Whenever I see cars at night going down the street, I like to try to put some type of effects around the headlights, and I also like to put some type of effect around what the headlights are trying to illuminate. So in this case, it's going to be this particular portion of the street. So I'm thinking give it a little bit of texture, or maybe just give it a little bit of haze just to give it some more drama. But first, let's go ahead and just gussy up these headlights with a little brush effect. So we'll go over here to our brush menu, and I got a bunch of brushes that I installed. These little sunshine brushes, something like this. And I could take that brush, shrink it down like so. Yeah, something like that would be okay, right? I'm just sort of comparing it side to side. And to always be safe, I'll just add a new layer so I'm still non-destructive. And then I want to take a sample of this color, so I'm using the same color. And then I'll just blow this up like that and just put it there. So we have a nice little star on the headlights. That's way too big. Undo it. Let's shrink it down some. Not too bad, still a little too big. A little more, like that. Yeah, that's better. And then we'll shrink this one down. Something along those lines. So now I got the star effect, but I wish it had a little more softness to it. So I'm going to blur it out some turn it to a smart object, filter, blur, a little bit of Gaussian blur, and you'll see it softened that up just a touch. So this is without the blur on it. And as I crank this up, you'll notice it softens just a touch, like that. There we go. So that looks a lot better to me. That looks a little more realistic, and I could probably crank it up a little more, so I'll do that too. Like that. Yeah, that works. All right, so now I want to play around with the street, and I'm going to create a new layer, but this time we're going to go with a different tool. I'm going to put this mouse away, and I'm going to pull out my Wacom tablet and my wonderful stylus here. This is a Wacom Intuos tablet. I highly, highly recommend adding a Wacom tablet to your workflow if you're doing photo retouching. They range anywhere from about $70 up to about $1,600 or maybe even $2,000 depending on your model. This is a very inexpensive, I think this one was about $100, and we'll put links in the show notes to this particular model, but I love this thing, and it really does make doing what I'm about to do next a lot easier. So okay, so we're going to hop on over here, and it's going to make this particular step a lot easier because I'm still thinking about mood and texture with the headlights here in this car. So let's go ahead and take a look at my screen here. So I'm going to hop on over and hit this little lasso tool, or L on my keyboard, and I'm on a brand new layer, so it's going to be totally independent of everything else I'm doing. And I'll just draw a little something like that. And then I'm going to take my paintbrush, change my paintbrush back to a regular brush. And then I'm going to make sure my brush has a low flow. And I'm going to use the same colors again, like this. And with my tablet, I'm just going to lightly press down and lightly paint like that, this extra light. And see, that looks a little too light for me, so I'm going to change that color tone. So let's get rid of that. We can undo, undo, undo. And I'll change the color to something a little bit darker, but not too much. And just sort of paint in that area. Something like that. All right, so now I want to give that a little bit of a blur. So we're going to blur this out a little bit more, like so. Give it a little bit of softness. Hit OK. It'll think about it. And it should almost look like a little bit of smoke when I'm done. So I'm going to get rid of that. Okay. And then I'll just sort of brush this away. Brush out the hard edges. Brush out the hard edges like that. Still not enough detail, but that's okay. I have another trick up my sleeve. Filter, noise, add noise. Noise, add noise. There. That, Gaussian, monochromatic. None of my stuff is working. Let's push that back up there. Cancel that. There. Let's do it this way. Duplicate. Push that up. Now we got it. Mercy. Filter. Noise. Add noise. That's what we want right there. That's what we want. So now I can take a mask and brush away. Brush all of this away. But I can only keep it around the lights that I wanted. Like that. It's getting better. Getting better. Getting better. See, now the lights have a little more life to them because you have that extra texture beaming out like that. We lost our little bit of starburst on them. There we go. So we get it back by moving those layers like that. There we go. That's more like it. Give me a little bit more texture. And we'll just push that opacity back just a little bit. That's better. But I still have a little too much on the rest of the image, so let's just get rid of it. Because I only want it for those headlights. And just brush it away with your Wacom tablet. Or your mouse. It's a lot easier with a tablet though. Cool. Lastly, I'm going to give it a little more flair. We're going to add a gradient. Nope, didn't mean to do that. It's the wrong button. Gradient map, like so. Because I like to change the color up just a touch. Like that. And we just talked about that whole teal and orange look. I'm totally about to contradict myself. We'll go right about there. Right about there. And hit OK. Yeah, that looks pretty good. So that was before. That's after. That's giving it a little too much dark though. Too much dark levels. So let's bring that up to a different color. Yeah, that's a little bit better. Okay, so now I can actually get into cropping and not lose any detail by cropping it down. Like so. Something along these lines will work. Yeah, I think that works there. And now I also want to put a little more detail right here on the streets just to sort of grunge it up some. Like that. I want to feather the edges of that selection so it's not a hard selection. Okay, and then I will say right here, we'll duplicate it like that. And that should take it all the way up to the top. No, it only took it here. No worries. Still fixable. And then we can sharpen this up a little bit more. And what's supposed to happen here, as my laptop starts to scream at me, telling me, you got too many layers. what should happen here is the texture of the street will sharpen up a little bit just to give it a little more detail. Filter, other, high pass. And that looks really weird right now, but that's on purpose. You click OK. And you change the blend mode to linear light. So now take a look at the street here where my mouse is. And when I turn it off, it softens up just a touch. So I want to add a little more texture like this. There. See, now you see the difference. Just added a little more texture there. I probably don't need it around that area, so I'll just mask that out. It's not adding to it right there, so I'll just brush that away. Right about there. That works. That works. Okay, I like that. I like the crop. I like the mood. Is there anything else I would do to this? This is how I spend my Friday nights most of the time, is staring at this screen and looking and thinking to myself, should I stop? Should I proceed? What else could I do? And I'll sip some more whiskey, and then it comes to me, yeah, you should do this, or no, you should do that. I think this looks pretty good though. What you think, Mr. Victor? Anything you suggest on this?
No, I think the rest of the night you just need to ponder and name your look. Like you said, you don't want to call it a cinematic look.
Right.
Like,
right.
That's how I would spend the rest of the evening.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, because in the chat room is right. There's a trillion things that you can do to an image, and yeah, there's a bunch of things that's going through my head right now. But I'm like, nah, maybe I should stop, because sometimes you can go a little too far. You know what? Actually, I do have one more idea. See, I'm sorry. I'm gonna add one more layer, and I'm gonna hit G for my gradient tool. And I'm just going to play around with something here. So let's go with this. Let's go with something off the wall. Just for kicks. It's a little too dark. Something like that. Yeah, I like that. So now I'll mask out the excess. Just sort of brush it away, because it gave it a little bit of a hazy look. Just keep some of it, but not all of it. Something like that. More old ladies crossing the street. Yeah, we could do that. I could just select her and duplicate her, and yeah, I could do that. That'll be for another show. Okay, I like that. So what I'll do now is I'll hit save on this, and it'll let me go right back to Lightroom. Click OK, because yes, it's telling me it's saving in the background. And it should take me back to Lightroom. There it is. All right, this is what it previously looked like. And this is the touched up, still not quite done. Let's blow my screen up a little bit. I'm gonna get a little more contrast, like so. I'm gonna add a little more haze, and then we're gonna vignette it. Nope, I don't need that. Do a little vignette on it, something like that. There we go. I'm digging that. Just simple, moody, what it felt like while I'm walking out there. And noticing something funny. You guys see this? What's that in her bag? Is that her smartphone? I'm just not noticing that. Interesting. All right. Well, that's it. That is it for this week's episode of Hands-on Photography. I'm putting my stylus down, putting the mouse away, and I want to say thank you all for hanging in here and watching me just go through and edit just like I normally would any other day. We're going to have some more episodes like this where we just fire up the laptop and go through and edit, whether it's my images or even your images. But of course, I need your consent if you're going to let me go through your images. Now, again, next week is the Thanksgiving holiday here in the US, so we will not be recording next week for HOP or FOP, Focus on Photography. But you can still check out the episodes that you haven't seen just yet. So go back and check out the back catalog, subscribe, and share those with other people that are interested in both of our shows. Thank you all for the tremendous support. Again, it really does mean a lot. And if you have some time, hop on over to our TWiT forums. That's twit.community. And go in there and just chat with all the other TWiT listeners, the big old massive TWiT army that we are. We have a good time just talking about different things that we mention in the shows, whether it's floss or HOP or This Week in Tech, or just general conversation. I want to say earlier today, someone had some questions about a Plex server, you know, just general stuff, having a lot of fun. All right, folks, until next time, we'll catch you on the next episode. Go on out there, create, and dominate. Take care.